Thank you. I'm David Stover. I'm a co-founder of Bureo. Really excited to be here in Busan with everyone for the conference. It's been incredible to learn all the amazing things that are happening here, as well as participate in the culture of Busan and learn how the ocean is so important to this city and how it functions and how this population thrives. So I wanted to start a little bit of our story. This works. There we go. So similar, I'm kind of following on quite nicely actually from David in his speech that talked about solutions to single-use plastic, to Richard in his speech which talked about some of the solutions that we're developing to clean up the waste. And I'm going to share the journey at Bureo. We've been working on looking at a source of discarded fishing nets that have been winding up in our ocean around the world. And our journey really started 7 years ago, similar to probably a lot of people in this room. We became aware of the issue of plastic pollution in our ocean. I read a book about 8 years ago from Captain Charles Moore. He runs an organization called Algalita. He was sailing through the Pacific and started documenting the accumulation of plastic there. And since then, in the last decade, there would have been more data that has come out and a better understanding of what's happening there. But for me, I grew up as a surfer. I grew up on a small island off of New York. I've lived less than a mile from the ocean my entire life. For me, it's more than just a hobby. It's a place that I require to visit on a frequent basis. Anyone that spends time around the water, whether you're a diver, a swimmer, a sailor, a fisherman, you can understand the impacts of that. And for me, the ocean has a therapeutic effect. It's something that I rely on in my life. And one thing that I started to learn when we started to learn more about plastic pollution was that when something's impacting an environment that you find essential to your life, you take it personally. And I was able to join a few friends who set out to kind of understand why this problem was happening and what we could do about it. And so we started with looking at the data that was available. And about 7 years ago, there wasn't much. We knew there was an issue. There were photos of plastic pollution in the ocean. But since then, we started to understand and be able to study this a lot more. And so a couple of these stats come from leading scientists around the world. Jenna Jambeck estimates about 8 million tons of plastic waste are entering our ocean every year. Marcus Ericsson from Five Gyres has done a couple of studies to extrapolate that about 5.25 trillion pieces of plastic are in our ocean. And these numbers are hard to comprehend. And what we can be sure of is that as a society, we're producing more and more plastic every year. And the result of that is starting to accumulate, and it's obvious to anyone that spends time in the ocean or on land or on beaches that we have a problem. And so the question that we're now asking is, how do we become a part of that difference? And that was a question that was pretty overwhelming to us. This issue, like a lot of issues in this world, can be daunting at times. It can seem like no matter what we do is fruitless and it might not be helpful, but the reality is that we can all be a part of the difference, and we started learning that. And an issue that we became stuck on was the issue of discarded fishing nets. And the idea was we have an ocean of plastic. It's way more complex than a lot of people lead anyone to believe. You have thousands of compounds of plastic. As Richard mentioned, estimated that about 80% of that comes from humans, but you can be certain that 100% of it is the result of our activities and design flaws that come from that. And so for us, we saw a lot of the single-use plastics, a lot of the cups and straws and utensils as a design flaw. We think that natural materials, like the materials that David's working on at EvoWare, similar solutions around the world, will remove that problem. And so for us, we didn't want to set up a collection program for products that we saw as easily designable, and we thought we could have a bigger impact if we focus on products that don't currently have solutions. And so we started asking questions to environmentalists, going to beach cleanups, speaking to organizations that were already running recycling programs, and we saw some gaps in what was happening. And one area that we got stuck in was the fishing industry. One of my co-founders, Ben, was doing a study on sustainability for the wild-caught fishing industry. And so we said, hey, why don't we ask the fishermen, what are they seeing in the ocean? Where's the plastic coming from? And it was a lot of the same things that we had been seeing on beach cleanups. And then we started talking to fisheries in Chile in South America about the problem, and they said, well, actually, you know, the gear that we use for the fishing industry is all plastic-based, and unlike other industries, we don't have waste management here. We don't have recycling bins for fishing nets. We don't have any alternatives for this material right now. You know, traditionally, fishing nets were natural materials. They were hemps and cottons. It was heavy. They ripped easier. They used a lot of fuel. So plastic was the design fix for the fishing industry. And all, like over 99% now, fishing materials are plastic-based materials. And so for us, we said, okay, there's no design alternatives now. There's no great systems in place, so we thought our highest and best use for the oceans would be to try to work on a program that could collect this waste back at its end of life. So this is a site that's really common around the world. This picture was taken in the south of Chile. This would be a tangle of fishing nets that is washed up on the beach. There would be some nets, some ropes, some line, probably some single-use plastics caught up in there as well. And really, we use these images because it helps to show how complex and difficult this waste is to manage. And you know, for us, the fishing nets in particular, we've been able to ask a lot of questions as why is this material there? How does it get there? What are the problems? And overall, what we've learned from the fishermen and from the industries that we work with, it's a really complex and difficult material. Even to work with the fishing nets, they get entangled, they rip, they're often repaired, they're expensive, they're large. This is a broken system. And at the end of life, it becomes even more difficult to manage because oftentimes there's financial disincentives or heavy fees related to disposal of these materials. So unfortunately, in the disposal of them, they can make it into landfills where they take a long time, hundreds and hundreds of years to break down. They can be left illegally in dump sites. They can be left in waterways. And in certain cases, they can even make it into the marine environment. And in talking to the fishermen, certainly not their fault. This is like I said, it's a broken system where the industry is really struggling with this waste stream. So for us, because of that, what the result is that in the ocean, you have a really complicated waste that results from the fishing. It's been identified as one of the most harmful forms of waste in the ocean, and that's because they're built to design to fish, and they continue to do so in the ocean. In addition to wrapping around coral reef systems, they're quite large and take a long time to break down. So our response to that was to set up Bureo. Bureo is a for-profit company. We started 6 years ago. We actually began with a grant from the government in Chile. I'm originally from the US. I live in California now, but we have a team in South America. I've lived in Chile for a year, and I spend about 2 months there every year now, and we work in about 26 fishing communities there. And the way that our program works is that we engage with the fishing industry, the government of Chile, nonprofits, and industry to educate people about how the waste can be managed at its end of life and be put into products. And for us, it's important that we run that as a business so that it's sustainable. We're able to scale and replicate this program in order to really have impact and keep this material out of the ocean. So this is Ben on our team in the middle, co-founder working with some of the collection managers in Chile. Just to give you a background of how the program works, we're community-based. So we educate the fishing communities about how their material can be used at its end of life. To be clear, we're not diving to pick nets off the bottom of the ocean. Our focus is educating the fishermen and working to collect the nets at the end of life. You know, the ocean itself, there's a good analogy that's used in the nonprofit world for the ocean, is that if you had a bathtub filling up with water and it started overflowing, would you start wiping up the water on the floor, or would you turn the tap off? And it's our view that you can do a bit of both, right? You can clean up the water that's there, and you should try to turn the tap off to the water stop coming in. And so our programs, while they support other initiatives, certainly beach cleanups, localized collections like Richard, as well as removal of debris from the ocean, our program's focused on the source of that material. And particularly for fishing nets, because it's such a complicated material to remove from the ocean, most of the nets we work with are nylon, so they sink. So they would move through the water column unless they were held by buoys and fall to the bottom of the ocean. So for us, the most critical point to capture that waste is as soon as it loses its value. And that's when the fishermen stop using it, when it rips or tears. So by educating the fishermen, they can work with us, we can incentivize them, we can pay them for labor and materials to prevent this material from ever reaching the environment after its use. And that's really important because once the fishermen are done with the nets, they've lost all their perceived value. And so it's on us to show them that this has value and we can help them manage it so that it doesn't make it into the marine environment. So we're kind of known in the US as a skateboard company because in 2013 we actually designed a skateboard from the material. We started out as a niche skateboard company. I think we envisioned ourselves selling lots and lots of skateboards around the world to clean up the problem of fishing nets. In reality, what we've learned over the last 6 years is that the problem, the scale of the issue, is much, much larger than we could have ever imagined, and that around the world, fishing nets continue to be used and generated, and the waste keeps piling up. So we've made a transition ourselves. We're more of a B2B business now. We work on setting up the recycling programs, educating the communities, and connecting that waste material with industries and companies that can use it as an input and a raw material to design products and keep that material out of our environment. And so the way that our program works, we do take different types of nets. We also work on a couple of different recycling methods, but in its simplest form, when we collect the nets, they're clean, packed, and then they're shredded. So picture like a big blender, shreds the material, and then we melt it down into a raw material that can go into products. That's its most simplest form. Obviously, for recycling, the most complicated things to think through are the consistency of material, any contamination issues, the cleanliness of it. So we work to isolate materials from the fishing industry, clean them and pack them in a way that we can add value to them to be used for production. So one thing that we like to highlight with the partners that we work with, and we have quantitative data to kind of support this. Ben on our team has a master's in life cycle assessment. This is studying how products are built and their impact on the planet. For us, we didn't want to go through all this effort and at the end of the day use more energy or use more resources to try to fix a problem and then create another problem. And so it was really important that along the way we understood our impacts in running this recycling program to show that we'd have a positive impact on the planet, because that was really our goal here. And so in addition to having an obvious benefit of keeping material out of the environment by collecting it, what we're able to show is that companies that rely on this plastic, which we focus on long life products that have end-of-life solutions, to Richard's point, it's a design flaw. Products that are short-lived shouldn't be made with high-quality plastics. A lot of the plastics we collect in the fishing industry are highly engineered, durable, and valuable materials, so they should go into products that are highly engineered, durable products with end-of-life solutions. And for those products, we're able to show companies and the world that if we remove the reliance on new materials, or what's referred to as virgin plastic, we can also reduce our impacts to the planet. And you have savings in fossil fuel depletion, water depletion, and obviously the emissions that are involved with creating that new plastic. And for our part, when we go through and recycle plastic, we have an impact. So we use energy to recycle. So we look at how can we involve PV systems or solar energy to offset any fossil fuels that are used. We look at water depletion. We use low amounts of water to clean the nets. So we've worked on some water savings initiatives at local schools and manufacturers to reduce that. And so we've gone through our supply chain to try to limit our impact. Nonetheless, we still have an impact as a producer of a material. But at the end of the day, we've gotten comfortable that by preventing that waste and mitigating our environmental impacts through creation of the raw material, we can have a positive impact on the people on the planet that we work with. So this would be a common site at a warehouse of ours in Chile. This is a purse seine net, which is a type of fishing. It's nylon 6 is the material. Nylon's a highly engineered material. It's durable. It can last in the elements. It can be around much longer than the time it's used in a fishing net, where it can be ripped and torn. and we can repurpose it into products. And so these nets are aggregated in our warehouses with local community collection managers and teams. This would also be a common site where the nets have been separated. This net is being hung to dry, so we use natural elements, the sun. In Chile, in South America, we rely on to dry the materials, which is an important process. This is a pretty low energy power washer where it uses air and water to blow out sand and salt and other natural debris. I'd say the most labor intensive part of recycling the nets is the separation of materials. Unfortunately, even with the recycling technology and the advances that we have, this is a very manual process, teaching people to go through the material and remove foreign debris that would potentially contaminate the recycling run. And this is a misstep in a lot of recycling programs. This is probably the most time-consuming thing to do, is to make sure you have a highly consistent, clean, and durable amount of material that can then be used for production. So this is our warehouse, one of our warehouses in Chile. That's palletized fishing nets from the southern fishing industry in Chile. That's probably about 50 tons, 50,000 kilograms in there. And what we're showing is that we're trying to make this waste material a commodity. So this is a previously discarded material that we're trying to add value into it and bring about change in the way that people use it. This would be the recycled pellets. So for most of our products that we work with our partners on, this is the starting point. So this was what happens when you melt the nets down, you pelletize it. In the room today, if you're holding a cell phone, if you have the little remote controller for the volume, the device I'm holding in my hand, cameras, all around, you'll find products that are injected, molded from plastic. Well, this is the starting point. These are raw pellets that plastic is shipped around the world and produced in, and this is the starting point for all the plastic products that we use. And then there are various ways to manufacture with it. Most of them, or all of them, are using heat and pressure in a mold, whether that's something that's hollow, whether it's a solid part. And so for us, we've aligned with partners that are currently using this material, in this case nylon, and found ways that we can replace their new materials with our recycled materials. So we started making our own skateboards. Now we found partners in the sustainable furniture industry. We mold a back of a sustainable chair from the plastic. We work in the surf industry where we make accessories molded from the fishing nets. We work with the sunglass industry. We mold sunglass frames. We have contacts in the automotive industry. Our goal is to work with industry partners that are utilizing these materials and replacing them with a new recycled source. So we've established a brand for the material, Net Plus. Net Plus really refers to the traceability of the material, where it's coming from, obviously, in the recycled fishing nets. So we started to use this brand with partners that have brought on our material, and we found that in addition to having a tangible impact, like David would through his new innovation on materials, or Richard would through their branded devices to collect the plastic, in addition to having recognition of those materials and those brands, probably the bigger impact that we're all having is the awareness to the issue, is opening people's eyes to the way that we've been consuming plastic, the way that we've been developing products, and really demanding change. And we've started to see that around the world, that companies are responding to consumers' demands to have more responsible products. Consumers are communicating that they want to know how their products are made, what are the materials. And so we're helping companies and guiding them in showing that this is the right thing to do for the environment by using a more responsible material, but consumers and the markets are having a response to this. There is a return that's to be made financially on this, which is really a win for the planet. So this is an example of a project we launched last summer with a company, Costa Del Mar. The frame is made 100% from recycled fishing nets. The glasses themselves are made in Italy. It's a glass mineral-based lens with the highest quality polarized filter in the world. And so it's an example of connecting a previously discarded material that was worthless and now selling these retail for about $200 US. And the impact of that, in addition to actually removing some material and contributing to the solution, is they reach millions of people every year, and they're reaching them with a story that's inspiring them to do other things. And for us, as sourcing the material, one of the best parts of our job is when we get an email. Someone says, hey, I saw your sunglasses or I saw your skateboard and I heard your story and you inspired me and I stopped using a plastic lid on my cup, or I started riding my bike to work more as opposed to driving. And these are the impacts that are really going to change our society and that we're really excited about. So to date, we've collected about 275,000 kilograms of material in our 6 years. In our first year, we did about 10,000, which is 10 tons. This year, we should do about 200 tons in a 12-month period. And we hope that in the next 5 years, we can do about 1 million kilograms a year, or 1,000 tons. And unfortunately, we're still scratching the surface of this issue. So we're just playing our part, and we'll continue to kind of play our role and try to have impacts. But it's really going to take a real group of people and environmentalists like we've gathered at this conference to really make a difference, because we truly believe that every fishery in the world should have access to a management system to dispose of their nets. And that's not something that we're going to be able to provide overnight. We're happy to help and support other countries in understanding how we do what we do and work where we can. But we think this isn't a problem that should fall on the fisheries. It's a problem that should fall on governments, the communities, and industry to help come together and solve solutions to keep this material out of our ocean. Thank you.